All right, so let's talk through this class. Let me just give you a little history of it. So I used to teach this class very traditionally, very boringly, out of a textbook. The first time I taught it, I got the textbook from the previous professor. Oh, it was a horrible, really horrible textbook. Had nothing to do with security analysis. It was overly simplified. And so the class is called security analysis, which is a career. It's a job in finance. So I went back to Dr. Misra and said, can we just radically change this class? And he said, that's fine. It's going to be more difficult. So the students that take it, they're going to have a huge advantage in the job market because we're going to do something you don't normally do in an undergraduate class. And he was fine with that. So my vision was, you're going to actually do the job of security analysis. You're going to take a 40-hour week and we're going to spread it out over the entire semester. All right. So you'll do the actual job, what you would do in a security analysis role. We'll have to talk some about the industry itself, the sell side. Y'all know the sell side versus the buy side. Does that sound familiar? So we'll talk some about that. I have one class, September, I think it's the Tuesday after, the Tuesday a week after Labor Day. I have two alums that are going to speak to the class by Zoom. One just finished an intern as a security analyst. He got offered a full-time job, so he's going to talk about an entry level. The other one's been doing this for several years and is kind of seasoned veteran. So you get to hear both sides of those. And I'm not. I think Bensie's still on the sell side, and I think I don't know if y'all remember Jamari. He graduated just a couple years ago, but I think he's on the buy side now. He's finishing up his graduate work in Washington, D.C. and just got a job offer in New York. I saw both of them in New York a couple weeks ago. It's amazing what UTSA alums are doing. We used to be UTSA inferiority complex, but we don't have an inferiority complex anymore. They're getting the best jobs. I mean, if you went around that table, the companies they're working for and the positions they have, they're doing as well as any school in the country. So many of them have taken this class. So
recording in progress.
See if that works. That's not gonna be good. Second. All right. Okay. So what you do in this class is you're going to write a research report. That's what security analysts do. We're going to go through all the steps. There's some of the stuff in here. This is kind of a kitchen sink, if you know what that means, kitchen sink kind of approach. Everything you could possibly do in a security analysis report, we're going to put it in there. And when you get into an actual job, you might throw some of those things out. So we'll see. So there's 9 papers spread out over the semester. The hardest papers are the first 2. So that's good news. After you get past the first 2, they get much more straightforward after that. So don't get discouraged at the beginning because especially the industry analysis is really, really difficult to do. Because I can't give you a real good template for the industry analysis because every industry is different. The second one is the company analysis, which is a little bit more straightforward, but even then a little tougher. Then when you get to papers 3, 4, and 5, I have very specific templates that you follow. Doesn't mean that it's easy, but you know exactly what to do. You just follow that template. So that makes it a little bit more straightforward. So the big thing we got to do this week, it's a smaller class, so we might be able to handle some things that do things a little differently than we would in another class. So we'll talk through that as once I see what companies you pick. But it is an in-person class. So we got a few people on Zoom today, but we need you here in the room. You can make up 3 classes by watching the YouTube, but you can't do more than that. So it starts affecting the grade. So attendance is critical here. So each paper is worth 1/9 of your grade. You can get 2% added for attendance, and you can lose 5% for attendance. And you could just get kicked out of the class if your attendance gets too bad. So At some point, it's just too much. And then if you do the instructor survey, you get an extra 1%. So it's very straightforward. If you look at how the papers are structured, you've got essentially a month to get paper one. And it's the hardest one. You want to start on it this weekend. We'll talk about some stuff, especially Thursday night. We'll spend a lot of time on exactly what you do in paper one. 2, 3, and 4 are all combined because they all make sense together. I'm extremely flexible to a major fault in this class of accepting late papers, which encourages what? Procrastination, which is death. Guess what? It's also death in the career. Let me tell you what secure analysis is. You sit there for 3, 4, 5 weeks and no one says a word to you. You better have something to end those 5 weeks or you're in a lot of trouble. It's one of the most, it may be the most autonomous job there is. When I was a security analyst, there was no one telling me what to do. They give me a company, can you research this company? And they left. 2, 3 weeks later, hey, we finished that research. And you better have something to show them. Guess what the training was? That was the training. Can you research this company? That was 100% of my training in security. I'd never done security analysis before. And so what did they expect me to do? Everything I did in college, which is what we're going to do here. So if they come to you and say, analyze this company, if you do everything we do in this class, they'll be impressed. All right. So you're going to be in good shape. That's the sell side or the buy side. Both sides, it works really well. So these 3 papers are combined. But if you finish paper 2 and not 3 and 4, which are easier papers, you can give me 2 and then start working on the other ones. But I encourage you, and I'm going to be a little bit more micromanaging. Don't get behind. Stay with the flow. Stay ahead. This weekend, make progress. Every week, you should be making progress on all your papers. I've had a few students procrastinate and end up doing a great paper by, spending 24 hours by 7 the last few weeks. Pretty amazing, but that doesn't work in practice. You'll kill yourself in this career if you do that. You've got to be very, very disciplined. So you got to find some way with this class that you set aside time for this class because you don't have an exam. You don't have a paper for a month. So you could just not do anything. Now you got 2 weeks worth of work to do. Now you got 3 weeks, you got 4, it's just going to pile up on you. So you got to set aside. I'd recommend you have a time every week, go down to FSC, sit down, have a list of things you want to get accomplished. I'm a big fan of, what's his name? Newport. Can't remember. It's Cam Newport. He talks about how you're productive. And he says, productive is not you sit down at the computer with your phone there and Facebook open. You're productive when the phone, you can't see it and it's turned off. You have no access whatsoever to social media. And some students say, yeah, but I see this issue. I need to go Google it. He says, fine, write that down and keep working. At some other time, go Google it. Because what happens when you Google it? You check email, you check Facebook. And so I forget the name of his book, something work, but his peers are like, how do you produce so much stuff? You're just so productive. He says, that's it. I forced myself to shut down social. I think he's completely off of social media. That may be too much, but he says, I don't do social media. That is an incredible big waste of time. So some students says, wow, I spent 5 hours. So no, you spent 2 hours on Facebook, an hour checking email, and you actually did 2 hours of work, but you were so distracted. Even that 2 hours was only like about 30 minutes because you kept restarting and having to start from scratch. So you got to find some way in this class. If you can't do that, then this career of security analysis may not be the thing for you either. Is that you really have to be able to do that. To me, it's kind of fun because you do whatever you want to do, but at the same time, you got to make sure you're doing something. Now, it's a little easier when you're working 40, 50 hours a week because you got to come in and do something, so you got to force yourself. With the classwork, where you don't quite have that structure enough, if this class was you had to spend 10 hours every week on this class, you'd probably get a lot more done. You don't have that. You got to create your own structure. So really, really important. After that, papers 5 and 6, if you had my investment class, that was papers 3 and 4 in that class. Exactly the same papers. So you've already got those. If you haven't done that class, I have a tutorial I'll get you through it. Paper 7 is a modeling piece that I really want y'all to all really sink into, make sure you know how to do it. It's really important to be able to do that. If you're in an investment society, we do that. In our investment society, you could join the investment society and lead a sector team that does your sector, and you can build your model in there and have it done and get your resume that you were teaching a class, which looks really, really good. So you could double up. 8's the easiest, and 9 is the exec summary. So it's just a summary of everything else you did. What we do with paper 9 is not so much a lot of writing, but it's fine. And I'll give you some examples of sell side reports where you want the rate of report looks just like that. You want to get it as much in that. So it's spread out throughout the semester, but you really got to get working on this one immediately because it is the hardest paper. Just to show you what the papers are, the industry and macro analysis starts, the company analysis second, fundamental analysis. Let's see who's in this class. I don't think none of y'all were in my honors class, were you? So they did a paper very similar to that one, but that one's one where I give you a template and you have to follow it. So you have no choice. So you're going to follow that one. The forecast is tough for some students, and I'll give you a template you can use, but the hardest part of a forecast is the revenue forecast. And there's probably 3 or 4 different ways you can do a revenue forecast. So I'll show you the different approaches. You'll just have to pick one that makes most sense. The forecast is a good one where if you're not sure, just come meet with me in the FSC and we can figure it out together. Because I don't really, you say Coca-Cola. Yeah, you could do Coca-Cola geographically. You could do it by product type. There's a few ways you do Coca-Cola. You'll see one thing I'll show you if you look in the class. Let me go to student view so it looks like that's not good. Are y'all having good Canvas experience? No? So hopefully this is what your Canvas looks like. And if you look at it, you notice there's student examples. And you can definitely use those student examples. You can't copy and paste, and they're so out of date. A lot of them, some of them are, wow. Some of these are, do I still have general? Yeah, that's General Dynamics 1. Oh my word. 15 years old. It's a really good paper, especially when you get to the industry analysis. General Dynamics is really hard. They do commercial airlines. They also do defense spending. He had essentially 2 industries he had to analyze. Commercial airlines is completely, defense. You're looking at defense budgets of governments around the world and all those kind of things. So it was so he did a great job. I really like the, let's see, where was that one? I think it's Chipotle. I may show you his. He does a great paper 1 where he breaks up the industry. What different type of restaurants are there? Really good job. You'll notice in most of the, see if I find a good one. Vail might be the only one, but in most of the energy companies, your paper 1, you're going to talk upstream, midstream, downstream. You're going to have a whole section on that and then define where your company falls in there. That's why paper 1's so tough. Every industry is different. How are you going to handle it? So we'll get into that and you'll see that. But these papers, Costco is a company you could do. You could certainly use this Costco paper that give you some ideas. You can't copy it, but you can certainly look and see how did he handle this or how do you handle this? So you can use that to help you with it. I don't know if I have every single industry in there. Adobe's a great company to do. Pretty interesting. People thought Adobe might go out of business with AI. What did Adobe do? They created a great AI product and got ahead of the curve, and now they're up a bunch. It's interesting. Each one of these companies is very fascinating, very interesting. So what you've got to do is pick the company. So did y'all got my email? Did you? So let me hand this out. Those online, just go do this. Those online, I'll just have to, I guess, hold it up or something, but, I'm not really sure what's on Zoom right now. Did I get into Zoom? No, I'm in Zoom, right? Oh, I got the, okay. So I'm showing them the list of companies that were on business breakdowns. So, oh, Derek, you're on there. So Derek, let me know if there's any issue with Zoom. Did you see it? So I'm not saying you have to do one of these companies. I don't know if any of y'all have listened to Business Breakdown yet. Jojo, you said you did yours. Which company were you listening to? Yeah, it's an interesting company, isn't it? It's pretty fascinating. So the advantage is the hardest thing about this paper is most college students, they focus on the 20 most important things. And that's not how secure analysis is. Secure analysis is the 1, 2, or 3 most important things. The teams we've had, we do the CFA research challenge, and the teams that I've won are the ones that are able to get their company down into a couple of points. The Southwest Air team, they won, they went to state and they went to nationals. It came down to airlines have been doing really, really well. Because of that, Southwest pilots are asking for big raises and jet fuel prices are rising. So they're going to have to negotiate these contracts because the pilots are like, wow, you're making all this money, but that's about to all go away because the hire. So they got it down to that thing, and they did a great job by just doing that. The team that won 2 years ago, they did a really bizarre company, but they were able to say, hey, this company's issue is the way they do acquisitions. It's destroying them. They're destroying them, and they really explain it really, really well. And they put a buy on, put a sell on a company. And they won the competition, and then that company's stock price shot up dramatically right after that. So obviously they're wrong, but who knows? So the nice thing, I love Business Breakdown. If you're not listening to it, I get in the habit. What these are, this isn't all the ones they did, but these are the ones that would actually work in this class. They have good, decent data. And the advantage you have is Business Breakdown does a great job of zeroing in on the main issues of this company. It's really quite well. It was like 45 minutes, maybe, or not quite, more than 30. So it's not an hour, so it's not that lengthy, and you don't really need that much time to talk about a company. So this Business Breakdown really helps you a lot with paper 2. Now, paper 2, you're trying to figure out, does this firm have an economic moat? Do they have some competitive advantage that is powerful and they can protect it? And what is that? So they talked about one of the companies in here that I didn't really know anything about is where is it? La Flor and Decor. I've seen some Flor and Decors. I think not another interior direct decorating company. But then as you listen to it, you say, wow, this is a very different company. They've got a very different model. Makes a lot of sense. Copart. What are they, about 40% of the industry or something? I mean, it's like dominate this industry. Why? Because they did it differently than everybody else. And so, I mean, that I remember that was a really good one. You could put a lot of that into your paper too. They just show the advantage of that company. I've never heard of Roper Tech. Do y'all know Roper Tech? Really, really fascinating company, huh?
Is there any companies that we can't do?
There are, okay, let's talk about companies you can't do. So banks, insurance companies, out. Yeah, they don't, I can't do especially our model for paper 3, banks and insurance companies are spread businesses. They're very, very different. A lot of stuff you learn in undergraduate don't apply to bank, like turnover. There's no such thing as a turnover for banks. It doesn't really make sense. Even free cash flow, banks and insurance companies don't really have free cash flows. So that doesn't work. Companies that are very, very new, like a Zoom doesn't work well. Tesla doesn't work well because you have so many years of just massive losses. So you can have a few years of losses, but you can't have 6 out of 10 years of losses. So I was going to show you tonight, but maybe I'll have to show you Thursday night if I can show you Capital IQ. So I have a model I built for you that you're going to use for paper 3. But I created a shorter version of it. Because when you do it for paper 3, you bring in your company and the whole industry. And Capital IQ, if you have used it, it's really slow. Because every time you do something, it reloads everything. And so I created a version that's just your company. So you can put your ticker in on Capital IQ, you can quickly see if you have good data. I'll show you that on Thursday, which lines to look at. So the biggest issue we've had, so you would think McDonald's would be a great company. Say, hey, I want to do McDonald's. Well, sorry. I'm still working on my lawsuit against Zoom for causing me so much stress. Right, McDonald's seems like a pretty straightforward company. And then you go through their financials and you look at their balance sheet. And what do you notice about their net worth? I mean, notice anything? Negative net worth. They're bankrupt. Is McDonald's bankrupt? What did McDonald's do? Sure. So you go to their cash flow statement and you discover that they're they're paying dividends. Let's see, where's their they're buying back their stock, they're paying big dividends. This is something, when I was in undergraduate in the 80s, if I asked, would a company ever buy so much of its stock back that its net worth would go negative? The professor said, are you crazy? No one ever would do that. Well, they do that. Starbucks has done that. Pizza place, I can't remember the name of it, Papa John's has done that. Dunkin' Donut, for some reason, the restaurant companies have done this. Negative net worth makes analysis really, really difficult. So McDonald's is off. McDonald's used to be a really popular one. There was one semester before all this started happening where I think like 6 people in the class were doing McDonald's. I got really sick and tired of reading about McDonald's. But you can't do McDonald's. I'm pretty sure Starbucks is, the last time I looked. Yeah, negative equity, $8 billion. Yeah, they're buying their own stock back. I haven't heard, if you did a company like this, it gets a little tricky to see what they actually say. You would probably want to go to the annual report where it first goes negative and see what they say there. I haven't done that before. This is such a strange phenomenon, but it seems really concentrated in restaurants for some reason. Doesn't make sense to me. There are some restaurants you could do. I think Chipotle still works pretty well, and I think I put Chipotle, and I can never remember how to spell Chipotle. The T comes first, right? CMG. So Chipotle's fine. They've got a net positive net worth, so they work. And there's a few other companies that are like that, but restaurants, I don't know. Maybe it's because McDonald's does it first, somebody else says, "Hey, this sounds like a good idea." There were a couple other firms on Business Breakdown that were really fascinating and interesting, but they had the same problems. So I had to keep them off. So negative net worth in 1 year, we could probably get around that. If it's in several years, probably not. Negative earnings, 1 or 2 years may be okay. Negative earnings, many years is not good. Where you really get tricky is if the net worth's negative and the earnings is negative, you get a positive return on equity, right? Because you divide a negative by a negative, and that's obviously not good. So save yourself some hassle by finding a firm who doesn't have bad data. And I did check all of these companies. Now, you don't have to pick one from here, but if you pick one from here, you got Business Breakdowns, is really helpful. And you got a firm whose data works really well. If you want to do a different company, you might do, like you notice Deere's on here. I was really impressed with the Deere discussion. I didn't realize how much they had captured the farming category and why they had such an advantage there. But you could do Caterpillar. So this will also help you with paper one, because they're not going to talk just about the issues of the company, but they'll also talk about the industry issues. So if you really don't want to do Deere, but you want to do Caterpillar, you could probably use the Deere's Business Breakdown to help you. Same thing with UPS. You don't want to do UPS, but you want to do FedEx. The UPS one was pretty interesting. What I like about the UPS is one of the things you have to do on paper too is talk about management, and they do talk. In fact, most of the business breakdowns, they do spend quite a bit of time talking about management. So, so these all work. Now, does anyone have companies that aren't on here that they're interested? Lance?
I like to do the MasterCard.
Yeah, MasterCard and Visa can work. They're not banks. So they can work. They did Visa, so you wouldn't want to do Visa?
No, I'll give you that.
I mean, you can certainly listen to the Visa business breakdowns. So yeah, MasterCard, man, they just do nothing but make money. Their net worth is positive. Yeah, I mean, did I get the right company? Oh, wrong company. I was thinking that's awfully small for MasterCard. MA. Yeah, I mean, it's Visa, MasterCard is very dominant firms. I hope they both go out of business personally, because I hope someone better. I feel that way about every great company. I hope they all go out of business because a better competitor comes along, puts out of business. I hope Amazon goes out of business. But MasterCard and Visa, would they go out of business? Well, there's some other business breakdown. They do the firm wise, WISE. You might listen to that one too, Lance, because they talk about a competitor to PayPal and MasterCard and Visa that could have a big impact. Who?
Eli Lilly.
You can. Pharmaceuticals are really, really difficult. You can't. When you think about pharma, you're talking. So with our pharmaceutical, especially paper 4, forecasting a pharmaceutical, you have to take every drug, figure out when it goes to generic, then you got to figure out what new drugs they might create. And how many trillions they got to invest, billions to make that. And so it's one of the hardest industries to forecast, but you can do it. They have good data. It should be a clean company. Yeah. Somebody else.
I saw NBA that they didn't.
Who?
The National Basketball Association.
Yeah, but I don't think it's publicly traded. So yeah, I mean, it would be interesting, but yeah. Now they did do, I thought they did Paramount, and I might have just missed that one, but there may be a couple that they did that you could do. But now you notice, so Claudia asked, so negative net worth, too many negative earnings, banks and insurance companies. The other things to watch out for, I'm not saying you can't do these companies, but I'm just trying to save you some headaches. Firms that do too many things can be really, really tough. Now, let me scare you to death here. Y'all okay with me scaring you to death? Let's look at Microsoft. Microsoft does too many things. So let's look at his paper. It might take it 3 hours to load it. But... So this student, so 134 pages. His index is longer than papers students write in my other classes. So why it takes so long? So he essentially had to write 3 or 4 papers, because you have the gaming, you have Windows, you have the cloud, you have probably AI now. But they do so many, and each one of those is a separate industry in and to itself. So he went all over the place, and he did it. It was a really good report. It's gotten him jobs, no question. But it's a little much for this class. 134 pages is a little much. Most people in this class, it's in a 60, 80 page kind of range, 9 papers, 10 pages or so each. So yeah, I mean, you look at that. So I'm not trying to scare you with this paper. The same thing goes for Disney. Disney, you got movies, you got ESPN, you got theme parks, you got cruise lines. Those are all radically different industries. So Disney is a tough one to do. I think Disney's on this list though, isn't it? So they talk about Disney, but it's really tough because they do so many things. Well, Coca-Cola is pretty straightforward. Pepsi's harder than Coca-Cola because Pepsi does drinks and snacks. Coke is essentially a drink company. No, you're gonna have to, you can do the 80-20. So if you can figure out these 2 products is 80-90% of their business that you can do. The challenge you're gonna have, like with an Apple, is they have all these different businesses. This business is really small, but it's growing the fastest. Right? So can you ignore it if it's growing the fastest? that makes it really, really challenging.
What about,
Boeing is one of those negative net worth companies, unfortunately. I don't know if they're still negative. Yeah, they're still, I mean, now they're not negative because they bought their stock back. They're negative because of I think because of their pension plan. The new pension accounting caused them to go negative. So you could, with a company like Boeing, kind of add the pension plan back and give you, but you'd be so artificial. It would be. Now you can definitely you can't do Airbus, but you can definitely do Lockheed and some of the others. And General Dynamics is a really interesting firm. It's a little tough. General Dynamics is essentially two very different industries, but it's not like Disney where you have 4 or 5 different industries. Yeah, real estate companies have a few challenges. You can do them. They're not essentially financials. When you get to paper 3, there's some things they don't have working capital. So that whole discussion on working capital doesn't work with the real estate company. So you will have some places you'll have to ignore the template.
like Netflix do like 2 different, industries like, entertainment and, streaming, or is that?
I would consider it one industry. Now Disney is competing with them. So Disney's, that's kind of tough. You want to compare Netflix to Disney. Well, you can't pull out just Disney's streaming business. You can get some of it, maybe the revenue. But if you want to see who has a better margin, you can't because Disney's got all those other things going on. So you can be tough. And some firms like Hulu, they're owned by a bunch of different people. So yeah, it's hard. That's part of what you're doing here is discovering how hard this is. Analyzing companies, that's one thing I don't like about undergraduate is we give students all the hard stuff and ask you to do the easy stuff. And then you get your first job and discover, wait, where did I get this stuff? It's like, you're supposed to know it. So in this class, you've got to go find this stuff. I understand that in the grading. I know this stuff is tough. So I know there's sometimes where you just have to just say, more research is needed. I can't answer this question. Costco is a great example. I don't know if any of you are interested in Costco. It's a really interesting firm. Notice anything? With their dividends? 90 cents, 79 cents, 70 cents, $10, 70 cents, $7, $5. Why did they do that? The answer is they won't tell you. Really bizarre. This really makes it tough. Now, when you get the paper where you're valuing them using a dividend discount model, how do you do a dividend discount model for a firm that pays a $10 dividend every 3 or 4 years? It makes it really tough. But is Costco doable? Yeah, it's absolutely doable. I gave you a former student's Costco paper. He did a great job. It's a really good paper. It's doable, but every company is going to have something that's just a challenge. It's just difficult. So like with pharmaceuticals, Luis, if you did that, forecasting is going to be your biggest problem. The other papers aren't quite so bad. The nice thing about yours is your industry is pretty well defined. It's pretty easy to get a bunch of big pharmaceuticals together to do a comparison. So your paper 3 is a lot easier. But then, you're talking about some pretty complicated stuff. Was Eli Lilly one of the ones they discussed? They did some pharmaceuticals.
They research on, wasn't that?
Oh yeah, they're in the middle of that. That's a business that could be trillion. Who knows? Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I'm not a big fan of pharmaceuticals because of some of the ethical challenges of the industry, but definitely there's some investment opportunities there. So how can I get you to pick your company tonight? It's the key. So don't.
I'm just curious, are we going to be, companies that are based?
You can, but you really need to double check with me on that. So it gets challenging. One student did, I think Vail is a non-US company. It's not the Vail like the ski resorts. It's an energy company, I think was out of Brazil, but they were from Brazil, so they were more comfortable. The challenge you have is if they have an ADR, it will probably work because they'll have US GAAP and US dollars financials. So that usually helps. So like Toyota, I've done Toyota before, and there's some place where you're gonna have an issue, where the data's just not gonna come over very well. If they don't have an ADR, it probably won't work, because you're not gonna have the US GAAP, you're not gonna be able to compare apples to apples.
Flooring decor, can you tell me a little bit about flooring decor? If I play flooring decor.
Oh, flooring decor. Well, you think that industry is already saturated, already there, so, boy, I haven't listened to theirs. I was listening to Floor and Decor, and I thought this is gonna be a really boring one, and then I was really fascinated, so whatever they said was really interesting. But part of their model is, you walk in, you don't leave with this stuff. And anytime you do a Floor and Decor or Home Depot, you have the homeowner, but you also have the interior designs. So who is their true customer? Is it the person remodeling the house, or is it the person doing the remodeling? And so their key was how they interact with those groups to get somewhat of a corner on the market. And I can't remember now because it's been months since I listened to it, but I found it really fascinating. It's a stock, I've looked at it and I think it's grossly overpriced, overvalued. So I thought, wow, you know, anytime I hear something like that, a really fascinating story, I go and look at the stock and then it's overvalued. So I'm not interested in it. Like Costco, I love Costco, but I think it's overvalued. I love great companies, but I don't want to pay 50% more than they're worth. So it's kind of a stock that I think, wow, great company, but overpriced stock. I could be wrong that it's overpriced. And I think in the business breakdown, they talk about how you can justify their current valuation. Obviously, you're talking about something that's directly tied to the housing market that's been strong and is kind of weakening, and you have mortgage rates coming up, so they're going to talk those kind of things. And then you got a stock valuation that's a little rich, but you don't need to pick a stock that you're going to recommend. You can perfectly well pick a stock that you say sell. I don't like this company, so the fact that it might be overvalued shouldn't be an issue. But I can't remember. I listen to all the business breakdown. I get them. I can't remember which one's which.
What about electronic items?
That has worked well in the past. Aren't they on the list?
Yes.
Yeah, people have done that one before. I don't think I have an example of that one out there. But yeah, it works well, especially what's happened with Microsoft here recently, that they bought
Activision.
yeah, Activision. I mean, there's a lot going on in this industry. I'm not sure, how does GameStop, I'm not a gamer. How does GameStop stay in business? They need to go buy there anymore? Isn't Microsoft, I mean, isn't that industry moving? So I don't understand that industry. It doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I know at least 3 or 4 students have done that firm and had pretty good results. And it is somewhat of a one product type of industry, a company, so it makes it a little easier to compare. The tough thing is you're comparing to a Microsoft and some that do a lot of other things, so it's hard to get an apples. But that's true. You know, the UPS versus FedEx, okay, that works really well. But then you got Amazon Prime command. So how do you handle that? I thought the UPS business breakdown and how they handle Amazon Prime, I thought was really interesting. Their argument was Amazon Prime's taking the worst part of the transportation industry, and UPS and FedEx got rid of the worst part of their business and they're sticking with the most profitable part. Well, that'd be a good thing to research and see if that's true or not. Go into the library. Y'all know what that is? If you type industry research, you see this right here. Industry research, Natasha. I don't know if y'all know Natasha. She's just a wonderful, wonderful librarian. She created this for us. You click on this industry research and she has links to all kinds of stuff for paper one to really, really help you out there. So library research guide. She has all kinds of links. There's Natasha there. You can call her if you have questions. She shows you what's available, what it has. We'll definitely be using MarketLine. Merchant Online. And in some of these other ones, it kind of depends on what your industry is. But she's got a lot of this set up, so you just a click, you go right into it, and you can get a lot of data. Yeah, everything she has in there, she has a link that you can go right to. But the other thing you need to do is, he won't let me out. So go into databases and go to C and go find Capital IQ right here. You have to be logged in as a UTSA student to do this. You go in there, so you log in. Once you log in, it will get you a Capital IQ account with Standard & Poor's. You'll then have to download it to your machine. It's the wonderful thing about Capital IQ. The reason I've been switching is that you can use Capital IQ from home. You can't use Bloomberg from home. So it allows you to get data. Plus, some of the models I built rely on Capital IQ. So you need to bring in the data. So you get the account. What I recommend you do, especially when you get the paper 4, is when you download Capital IQ, it'll ask you if you want the templates. And I would say yes. It takes a long time to load it, 20, 30 minutes to load them. But they have all these wonderful templates that people have already been pre-built. And they have a really good index of them all. So you can go find one that you're looking for. And you might find one, bring it up. And all you got to do is change it to the ticker of your company. And suddenly you got all this analysis for your company. So it's kind of similar to what I've done with the way I've set it up. But they have some really good templates, including on paper 4 for forecasting. There may be a good forecast template in Capital IQ for your company. So there's a lot of benefits to it. The other advantage of you getting this is you can then, in an interview, say, yes, I've used Capital IQ. That's becoming pretty popular out there. Is anyone trying that now? See how far you can get. One of the issues I've had with Capital IQ is sometimes I'll log in and it says you're already logged in. And so I'm trying to get in the habit of logging out every time I use Capital IQ. So if I go on the machine, it doesn't, and it won't log me out of the other machine. Like Bloomberg, if you do that, it just logs you out of the other machine. With Capital IQ, it says come back later. And you're like, how much later? And you come back later and it won't let you in. They do have Capital IQ loaded in the FSC. So you can use it in there if you don't want to load it on your own machine, but I would put it on the machine. So if any of y'all try it, you're not having good luck, let me know. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries to get it to work properly. Okay, so by Thursday night, you need to have picked your company and get Capital IQ loaded. What we're going to do on Thursday is we're going to really get into paper 1, and big part of paper 1 is just defining your industry. So part of your definition of an industry is what it is and what it is not. So the way you know you have a good definition of, let's say I'm going to do consumer staples, and I define it. If I ask you, does that include Costco? It should be obvious from your definition if it does or not. If I ask, does that include Amazon? It should be obvious whether it does or not. All right. So your definition needs to be clear. You don't want to have such a limited definition that your company is the only one in there. You don't want to have such a broad definition that there's 500 companies in your industry. So good industry comparison. Sometimes it's only 2 or 3 companies. So if I'm doing a Home Depot, you got Big Lots and Lowe's and some of these other, how far down do you go? I'm going to show you a file on Thursday where I have the Russell 3000 by industry, so you can kind of see what Russell thinks are the comparison companies, so that can help you somewhat. Now that's for paper 1. Paper 1, you might have 2 or 3 competitors, you might have 10. If you're doing restaurants, it's possible you have 10, 15 companies. Chipotle could have quite, casual dining has quite a few. Paper 3 is going to be a completely different list. Paper 3, you're going to broaden it out. You're probably going to have 50, 100 companies in your paper 3. So when you're doing Home Depot and Lowe's, you might include Walmart and Costco and some other companies in that, or other consumer discretionary companies as well. All right. So Thursday night, I get to get you far enough so you can really get into paper 1 over this weekend, so you can get a head start on that. All right. Anybody try to get into Capital IQ tonight?
For job title, is it student?
I guess I haven't registered in a while. Yeah, student sounds good. The key they're looking for is the UTSA.edu. That's how they know they have the contract with us. Anybody else try? And does your account still work? Have you tried it? Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, you'll have a Capital IQ button. Oh, well, you have to do the download. So we'll find.
Is when I log in, this is what it shows.
Okay, so Capital IQ has an online resource, but they also have an Excel add-in. I can't remember where the button is, but if you want to find the Excel add-in button and click on that and download it to your Excel. And when you do that, you'll get a capital IQ button. And when you're doing that, they'll ask you to put on all those templates and just say yes. And then make sure you don't have any, you don't have a paper due in 10 minutes when you do that, because it's going to lock up your computer for quite some time. Everybody knows what to do for Thursday? Keep your company, get capital IQ, and you can start working on paper one. You might go out and look at what Natasha set up for you. You can definitely start, get the annual report for your company. Your annual report for your company will have a section called business description. I would read that pretty early to see what industry they say they are in. That can help you quite a bit. So there's some things you can start doing now to get a little ahead of the game. So, all right, I'll stop it there. All right, let's start. What I want to do tonight, I'm going to go through a little bit of the class notes. And then I want to really focus in on paper one. Give you a really clear idea, because you need to make a lot of progress on paper one this weekend. This class always worries me because there's always a significant group of procrastinators. Some of them, I get more incompletes on this class than the other class, and most of them never make it up afterwards. So if you're one of those people that's worried, I can come in Monday and work with you. I work some with some of the day. If you need some kind of structure, say, okay, use my ideas. I don't know these industries as well. My background is insurance and banking, so I don't know all these industries. But just over time in teaching this class, I'm kind of learning just over time and just my own research. So if you got to make really good progress this weekend, all right? You need to have set aside time for this class every week where you're getting stuff done. Well, I was telling Selma, the first paper is really overwhelming. So I'm going to show you tonight what I recommend you do is a very detailed outline, and then don't go write the paper. Just go work on that one piece and forget everything else. And just do that, get it out of the way. And if you do that and spread it out over time, it's actually pretty simple. It's not that difficult. But if you leave it all to the end and it catches up on you, it's a really massive paper, especially paper one. Paper two is similar. After that, a lot of the papers after that are much more specific, or a lot of them, especially some of the later papers, it's you do stuff in Excel and explain what you did in Excel on the paper, which is not that difficult to do. So, but the problem is the two toughest papers come first, and students get overwhelmed with that, and they can just never get caught up with the rest of it. So you want to overdo it at the beginning to get ahead, and then it kind of glides at the end of the semester. So if you're interested in that, let me know, email me. I can come up here several hours on Monday and help you. I know we're having some capital IQ issues. Has anyone been successful? Yours still works, right? Yours worked on your laptop? No error messages, and you got it into Excel. So you can log into the Excel piece. Yeah, so get in Excel, and when you get in Excel, so that's one thing to do. Once you download it, go into Excel, you should have the capital IQ button in Excel, and make sure you can actually log into that, because that's somewhat.
Are you downloaded the voice that to download files? And then I tried to open it and it wouldn't open, and it was real weird. I would try to open like an Excel file, and it will pop out.
Oh, it showed up.
Like it will pop out together with
and you could log in then?
No, I will put in the information and it will let me log in.
Okay. Well, if you're having those issues, let me know. I'll get Natasha. The worst case scenario, this is for paper three. I can't, my capital IQ is working. I could create the file for every single one of you in under 2 hours. So if I have to do that, create it, I can create the file, copy and paste it as values and get it back to you. So we have that as a backup. We have to do that. But yeah, we've been having some capital IQ issues. I need to, in the FSC, I know there's capital IQ that works in that room, but the machines I've done, they don't work on any of those. So I have to go machine by machine by machine and figure out which ones are actually working, notate them, and let y'all know so you know which one works. The idea, so how many absolutely are having logged in the capital IQ in Excel on your machines? Juan Carlos, the only one? The templates? I think so. It says library. Yeah, I would say yes to that. So that actually should be pretty good.
I have.
It takes quite a bit of time, but, I think you can do it and still do other things on the screen. But I don't think you'll get that, I think you're in good shape, so I don't know why it works for him and it's not working for others. You might try different, you had a message like it was the wrong version of Windows or something that just couldn't. That's important, yeah, on a Mac, yeah, so Mac may be an issue as well. That may be true, Capital IQ may not work on a Mac. Do you have a PC?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's probably the issue. So I'm not saying go out and buy a PC, but yeah. So anyways, I mean, it's frustrating, but I'm not having you do this for the class. You need to learn Capital IQ. It is being used a lot in finance. It's quite common. So you need to get it on your resume. And the best way to get it on your resume is to actually have done a project with Capital IQ that you can show somebody. So I'm trying to help you out with that. Capital IQ is pretty amazing. It's got a lot of stuff in it. I haven't experimented with all of it. It's pretty amazing what all they have. So it's definitely a competitor to Bloomberg. All right, just the intro part of this class just shows you some students have used the paper from this class to get them jobs. One advantage of this class is on your LinkedIn, it gives you something to put on LinkedIn that's very impressive. And that is an advantage versus other schools. A lot of schools, I've talked to students, professors just hate grading and they've stopped doing papers. They do team projects. I was at one conference where the professor says, I'm not going to grade all that. I do teams. It saves me a lot of time. So he's not doing, you know, why do they tell you doing teams? Teach you how to work in a team, collaboration, all that. That's all garbage. No, they have you in teams because if you're in 6 teams, that's 1/6, you know, they cut the workload kind of dramatically. And that's true for a lot of major schools. So having a paper that you wrote, I remember one student in my risk class, she showed her paper from that class and they said, you wrote this? It wasn't a team? Said, no, I wrote it. And they took her to the next level of the interview just because she could write a, you know, good 20-page paper on her own. So it gives you an advantage. So definitely, so here's a guy that showed it. They actually said, don't show your paper to anybody else because then they're going to make us do that. I found a position in M&A in my second round of use. I got to speak to the MD. I'd sent my security analysis paper with my resume, and when she found out I wrote it without a team, there you go. She pulled the portfolio manager. I was working under for a meeting. Here, I don't know if I told y'all this story, but I had one student from this class, really strong student. So I was really impressed. But she wanted a job at UTSA that she didn't have experience for. She just started and they wanted 2 years of experience. So I called my buddies there and I said, just give her an interview. I was like, just be nice, you know, give her an interview, give her some experience. And she kind of thought she'd have a chance. And then she said, what do I do? And I said, well, take the paper from my class. It's a really good paper. I think her papers is one of the ones I gave you an example for. And they were interviewing her and thinking, we can't hire her. She doesn't have the experience. And then she somehow worked to give them the paper and they hired her on the spot when they saw her paper. And they called me and they said, she was several analysts for the job, but once she showed us her paper, we immediately offered her the job. And she's done well. She's not there anymore. She's moved on to other places, but she's doing very well. So, and there's other stories. I know one, I don't think he got the job, but he showed them the paper and then they spent the entire interview debating his company and his analysis, which, you know, not a lot of undergraduate students get to do that because he showed it to a portfolio manager and ended up being this big debate. So I think we already talked through this. So there are some industries that are much more difficult than others. Telecom, I don't think any of y'all are doing telecom, but telecom can be really challenging. Utilities, right now, utilities are extremely challenging, although I do think Nextera is a very interesting company. One of our previous students, I don't think his paper's out there because I think we lost it, but a really strong student. He actually went to UTSA and they put him in a risk management job that he didn't want. And so he went to the utility instead. He's moved around. His goal was to work for a utility that does a lot of alternatives because he just thought alternatives, he needed to have both. So he does the traditional stuff, but he also does wind farms and other things. It's a difficult industry because of some of the dereg that's going on, but he's doing well. Actually, his boss quit. So he told his manager that he wanted that job, and they said, you don't have the experience, but he said, give me a shot, and they gave it to him, and he's now managing the big department. He's doing great. I mean, he was like pretty amazing. He didn't write his paper on the utilities, but he's done really well. But it is tough. Utilities are really tough. Energy can be really tough. Someone's doing Exxon in here. I forget who's doing Exxon. You're doing Exxon. Exxon can be tough just because they do everything. The advantage of Exxon is pretty obvious who their competitors are. You got Chevron and British Petroleum. And so for you, you're going to have to go outside of the US to find those big companies. But it can be tough. Industries I find really interesting: manufacturing, medical equipment, tech, obviously, metals, chemicals. I don't think we have any of those on the list that I showed, but those can be really interesting. Some of them are interesting because manufacturing, metals, and chemicals are companies people don't know that well because they're not retail. And so it gives you an opportunity to really learn something that most people don't know. If you really want to be really excel as security analyst in these type of industries, your best bet is actually start on the corporate side in that industry. Work there 2 or 3 years, learn the inside, and then go work as security analyst. That can be a really great approach. The easiest industries are restaurants, but we see that restaurants are not too good. Some of you are doing Chipotle, I think. Chipotle works, but a lot of them have the negative net worth. Clothing, I don't think I gave you any clothing stores. And retail outlets, you had Costco in there. Costco is always a popular one to do just because there's a lot of really good data to use. I showed Selma Market Line. I'll show y'all that some again here. You have the library guide. One thing I've asked of you, I'm really into gratitude. And so if you really like this, can you please send Natasha an email and thank her for setting that up? She does so much for students, and no one knows. She's just like working so hard. So if you don't mind, use it. If it's useful, send her a nice email thanking her that you're using, and tell her you're using it in this class. That helps me too, because she's always, anytime I've asked, she's always helped. Now, are y'all Statista users? How many of y'all use Statista? Try it out. I'm not real picky on here for you having to double and triple check that the data is accurate. You can trust Statista. There could be errors in their data, but just trust it. If it's a chart, looks good, works on your paper. It's a pretty amazing website. You may have to go through UTSA to get it because they may require you to have a subscription of some kind. But had a student doing like a movie theater. You just type in the word movie. Most successful movies of all time, box office revenue, the highest grossing movies 2023. It's just, if you're doing movies, the question is streaming versus theaters. How are theaters doing? You're doing Dolby, right? And that was one of the things, I don't know if you listened to the business breakdown yet, but that's one of the things I ask is, doesn't Dolby do, Dolby's inside theaters? And they say, yeah, but that's not a big part of their business. It's really not that material. And actually, that's the part of their business that in theaters, that's the one place people are going because they want that experience. So, yeah, so they will have statistics on streaming versus theater tickets, who's buying the tickets. There's all kinds of stuff. I find it a little overwhelming because you really do have to word it just right to get what you need. Otherwise, a million things come up, but it's a really good site. So I'll show you MarketLine, if not tonight, on Tuesday. I'm not sure about Value Line anymore. I would probably throw that one out. That used to be a really major one. They probably have an online version. I don't know if I haven't looked in the library to see Value Line. The one thing I do love about Value Line, if we do have it, so you might check to see, is for every industry, they have a one-page summary that I find really valuable. So if you can find Value Line for your industry, that one-pager, they do a great job of synthesizing all the important stuff in one page. So you might try it to see, obviously, the annual report. Merchant Online, Merchant Horizon, that's more for paper 3 and following, so not so much for the industry side. Thompson One, some of these, Ibis World. So a lot of these are better for companies. So some of them are, MarketLine is more industry stuff. as well as company specific stuff. Some of them are more company specific stuff. So for paper one, won't see that as much. And Bloomberg, I do have some templates more for paper 7, so we'll get into that later. I do say, I say you could do this early in our semester, but at this point, I think you probably should just wait. So the key is prioritization. That's why I recommended business breakdown. Try to figure out what are the key issues that you want to be focused in on, so you're not researching 50 things. So the earlier you can say, wow, these are really the 3 issues that are most critical, you can set that up in all of your papers and make sure you hit them. Your goal is a decision. Be real careful in this class. It happens all the time where students become advocates for their company. You've got to keep it independent and objective. I realize the sell side has a reputation for, 90% sell recommendations, because if they do I'm sorry, the sell side is 90% buy recommendations, because if they put a sell on it, the CFO stops talking to them. And so they have an incentive to be positive, but don't do that. I see it. One thing I notice when students write, especially paper 2, is they start using the terms like we, as if they work for the company they're analyzing. You're not. You keep it independent. You say they. If they say they have the best customer service in the country, don't put that in your description unless you have some evidence that's true. Okay. So stay objective, stay outside. So you can put a sell or avoid recommendation on your company after you analyze it. You might love the company, but you think it's expensive once you do the valuation. So you could say, great company, but don't buy until it hits this price target. So be real careful, stay objective. It's really easy to become an advocate for your company. So anything that helps your decision, that's good. Everything else is fluff, so don't put it in there. Some students, it just pains them. They have these 3 paragraphs and they say, you know what, this really doesn't add much. Highlighting and hitting delete is like getting hit in the head with a bat. I can't do that. So, as college students, you're like, more pages is always good. That's not true. My first job in finance, I probably told somebody else this story, but the head of the department, he had a degree in English. I'm so thankful I worked for that guy for 7 years, because he knew how to write. And I never took a paper into him that he didn't shorten, ever. And I mean, sometimes 3 pages to 1 paragraph kind of shortening. He just knew how to do it. So have y'all know that famous saying, I would have written you a shorter paper, but I ran out of time? That's essentially what you're doing. Your first draft should be the longest, and then you start cutting out the stuff that's not that important. All right. So what is the format for this? When I took the CFA exam, they had a research report for Merck. I don't know why they put it on an exam, because there was no questions on it. It was too specific just to Merck. But what I did is I took that Merck report and I said, okay, the CFA Institute, which is, the professional organization for security analysts, they say this is what a research report should look like. So I went through that. I just outlined everything they had in that. And that's what I put into our template. And then I've added a couple of things. I added a forecasting side, mainly because I found a lot of students in this class had never done a forecast before. So you can't graduate without having done a forecast. So I added that paper. And then I added a technical analysis paper. That's the easiest one of all the papers. That's not in the CFA one, but I did add that one in because I want you to at least be able to talk to, that's the one that's least likely to be in a report when you do this for live. There's 2 types of research reports. So what are we doing? I want you to think in terms of sell side, because I want you to make it a marketing glossy, really good looking paper. The buy side, there's no form. It can be, in fact, I remember the question I asked when I interviewed analysts was, define a good company and define a good stock. That's my question. And people who had no experience, I just got these kind of UT Austin kind of answers. They use the word team every other sentence, and those kind of things that no one cares about in practice. People with experience, when I ask that question, they turn around to their I don't know, their carry-out, whatever, their backpack, and they bring out a big stack of paper and they start walking me through a company, and it's messy. It's got handwritten notes. It's not the glossy we're going to do in this class. It's the buy side, but they can talk about the company for the next 20 hours if you want them to do that. They just know the company and they know how to talk about it. So the buy side is anything goes. A lot of times it's just models and Excel, and that's all it is. They don't actually even put that into the paper. So I want you to do something you can put on LinkedIn. Looks really professional. So that's why for the very, very last paper, I'm going to give you some sell side reports to model after to try to work with that. Let me show you some of those now just so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's one for Jack in the Box. Y'all seen that type of format? So it looks real common. They're not well written. That's why I showed this in the class once and we started reading. It's like, wow, it's really badly written. But it looks really professional. So you really want to try this type of format. You don't want to use this format for the entire paper probably, but there is a format here you might think about. So one thing I encourage you when you start paper one, think format. So you want the two columns, I think. However, this is not a very uncommon approach where you have a narrower column on the left or on the right to put your graphs and charts over there, and then all your verbiage is on the right. It's a little tricky because it's hard to get everything lined up. I don't know if you've ever tried doing it. Get everything lined up in the right place. So it's kind of a hassle. But you do want to think about that before you start because it's kind of a hassle to change your mind halfway through and then you got to redo everything. So that's pretty common. They don't have any charts, so they don't really need this part. So it's kind of wasted space over here. I've had students, come up with kind of a marquee for their report, make it look like it's their company, and they put that down there. I try to find a report with a UTSA student, but they disappear too fast. On Bloomberg, I have them. I found one for Ryan. I was going to show y'all his, but it won't. The way they do it, they don't let you save it, so you can't take it. So we do have a few students. I've been watching Deutsche Bank to see if Angeline has her name on one here one of these days, but I'll keep looking. It'd be pretty cool to see a UTSA student on there. She called me excited one day because her boss had to go out on some emergency and she had to do everything herself. She'd only been there a few months. She was so proud. She was like, yeah, I did everything. You wouldn't even know he was gone. Got it all done. So she'll have her name on there here pretty soon. All right. The thing I don't like about this, some of their paragraphs is a little bit long, but good use of titles and exactly what you're doing. So you want your exec summary to be one page, so you have to work a little bit more prudently to get everything in there, but this is the kind of thing that you're looking for. You do have usually the current price and a price target. You have a good title that shows you everything you need. You probably will see more bullets than they have here. Let me show you another one. I'll find some more. I'm sure there's others that will work pretty well. These are kind of old. So similar type of format there. There's shorter columns on the right instead of on the left, but all of them you notice have a target price as the main thing they do. You're going to somewhere say what your recommendation is. They don't use the word buy, they say outperform. That's a pretty common one. You want that to be up front for what your final recommendation is. But look at what they put over here on the side and try to put that kind of stuff in there. They do have some charts here, some graphs over here and bigger tables there. Would that be too much work to do your entire paper in that format? I don't know. You'd have to kind of decide, but do think about it. The other thing you can do is look at some of the student example papers. Most of them are two columns that are the same, but just with the graphs in there as they go. Right? So think about the final product as you're going so you don't have to do a lot of rework. So we're doing a sell side. But the nice thing about the buy side is it's kind of anything you want to do. I started on the buy side. I've never been on the sell side. I was on the buy side, and I think I told you the training there, zero training. They just let you loose and just go. So here's the model that the CFA used. You start with an industry analysis. I have macro analysis separate. That used to be a separate paper. That's why we're 9 papers instead of 10. I just made the macro part of paper 1. And we'll talk about what I mean by macro there. Then fundamental analysis, that's papers 2 and 3. You're talking about a company, and then you're going to do a ratio analysis type of thing. Then you get into discounted cash flows. That's 2 papers, a discount rate and a discounted. I added a relative value chart. I said bring the Merck. It's so many years old, though. My word, it's older than most of y'all. But one thing I think is interesting is how many target prices, I mean, how many prices they have. I think I kind of like 132 that they have using all these different approaches. And that's essentially what you're going to have at the end. And then you're going to kind of see, well, our end result, I really think what a lot of people show on the first page. Are y'all familiar with the football chart? I like this approach. I'm seeing it a lot. So really, once you finish paper 6 and 7, maybe even 8, you essentially want to summarize all in one chart. What's the range of valuation I have versus where the stock currently trading? Right, and I'll show you how to do that at the end. But that's essentially what you're going for, is to try to figure out, does it have more upside than downside? There's another one, more upside than downside. So this one looks like it has a lot of downside. And it's pretty easy to create these in Excel. I added technical analysis that wasn't in theirs, and then you have your final one. The reason it says 6 and not 9 is fundamental analysis is 2 papers. The discount rates of paper and the valuations of paper. So 2 of those are broken out, and then you have the exact summary at the very beginning, actually. All right. So we'll walk through this. We'll talk about this. What I want to do next is get you ready for this weekend. So any questions up to there? So let's talk paper 1. Are y'all outliners, or you just start writing off the top of your head? Y'all do an outline first? I mentored a kid in high school that he could sit down and just start writing off the top of his head and write a really good paper. And it's like, that's not me. I can't do that. He was really like, he could just in his brain see where he wanted to go. I think you're better off writing this. So paper 1, the industry and analysis. Remember, you really have 2 primary goals in all of this. It's growth and risk. We're really after growth. Is this a fast-growing industry or a slow-growing industry? If it's a fast-growing industry, what could derail it? What could mess it up? I think in business breakdowns, they almost always ask, what could you're really big on this floor and design. What could derail it? What could mess it up? And they talk about, oh, well, this competition could. I think Copart, they talked about that. Who could come in and take Copart? I think like eBay's trying to do some of that stuff, right? With like an online, I was hearing eBay advertisements that you can buy used auto parts online kind of stuff. So who could come in and take over the business, and what would protect them from that? So you're after growth. So in this industry, I'm thinking in terms of, is this an above average growth industry, an average growth industry, or below average? What I mean by average, if our economy is growing 5%, the industry is growing 5%. If our economy is growing 5%, the industry is growing 8%, that'd be strong growth. Our economy is growing 5%, the industry is growing 2%. So you take a Valero. What's the long-term growth prospects for refiners? Obvious answer would be horrible. Electronic vehicles. What is Valero doing to try to manage that? They're doing some biofuels, some other things. That's still a really small part of their business. Is Valero really going to go out of business? That's the kind of questions you have to ask. What I like about business, another thing Business Breakdown does is they say, yeah, that's a risk, but over the next 10 years, it's not going to hit them. And this firm is still pretty well valued just based on what they're going to do the next 10 years, and then they'll have to address it. So yeah, you have to get into those type of issues. You never want to, as an analyst, be always positive. Say there's nothing that can derail that. That's just not. What can derail NVIDIA? Maybe China. Right? China has a huge advantage on AI, and that derail NVIDIA. Who knows? But everybody loves NVIDIA right now. I think they came out, was it yesterday, with their earnings, and their stock just taking off. But we were saying the same thing about Microsoft not too long ago, and then it died, and now it's come back again. We were saying the same thing about Amazon, right? Amazon really had a rough patch here the last few years. So always be thinking, where could I be wrong? Where's the scenario here? You're always thinking about competition. What's the new thing that could come in? Who could come in and take over this firm? So the first thing you got to do is define your industry. Who's in it, who's not in the industry. And this is probably the bigger definition. So if you're doing a restaurant like Chipotle, you want to find the restaurant industry, and then you want to do the subcategories. Don't forget Russell. Russell can help you with that. Russell 3000. They have the sector and they have the different industry groups. So they may be able to help you with it. So Coca-Cola is a consumer staple. That's too broad. Coca-Cola is a food. Okay, that's still too broad. Coca-Cola is a drink. That's still too broad. Coca-Cola is a soft drink. Okay, there you got it. They don't sell alcohol. They don't sell chips. They don't sell consumer packaged goods. They don't have stores where you buy stuff. So Coca-Cola is a soft drink. All right. So where do you start that? You probably start with the food industry, or Coca-Cola, you probably could start just with soft drinks and make that your whole paper. But if you're doing restaurants, you need to talk all restaurants, and then you got to get down to kind of what are they considered fast food, or what's the casual one? So I don't know, I have to see exactly where they fit in. Market line will help you with that as well, to give you some insight on where that is. So Geronimo, I don't know how far you gotten, but definitely you got upstream, midstream, downstream, and you got the conglomerates that do everything. You want to define what those groups are. And then you can say, in this paper, the focus will be on, all right, so you have a bigger category and you come down. So market line can help you with definitions. You can really and truly just Google define this industry, and all this kind of Google stuff's going to come up. I don't know if any of y'all use ChatGPT. Give me a good definition of this industry and just see what they come back with. Who knows what will come up. I'm reading Henry Kissinger's book on AI. You know how old that guy is, right? He's like almost 100 years old. He's writing. I don't think I'll be publishing a book when I'm 100. I don't think I'll be reading books when I'm 100. It's a really fast. I mean, it's really amazing what they've already accomplished with AI. It's pretty amazing. So you can use it, give you some ideas. You can't copy and paste it into your paper, but it can certainly give you ideas of how to define an industry. And again, don't forget YouTube. I'm a huge fan of YouTube for this stuff. There's a lot of free videos out there on just about everything. So, if you do, not to pick on Geronimo, but he does have a pretty tough industry. Industry research, energy. And you'll get all kinds of stuff for free. Now you may be careful. It could be some high school kids report So, be careful who it is, where it's coming from. That looks interesting, doesn't it? The 3 biggest future trends in the energy industry. So, I mean, I'm guessing it's alternatives or whatever, nuclear fusion or something, who knows? So define your industry and subcategories, and maybe some history. If you're doing semiconductors, everybody goes back to, Intel and back to the chip.
I know that.
The depends if you have access to it. I've never tried a consulting firm. A lot of times the hedge funds and the portfolio managers will have white papers on their website on different industries that you can find. One thing I've found really, really helpful, if we can actually get to it, and COVID may help us on this, is one of the best thing is the investment conferences. If you go to an investment conference, and it's hard to get into because they limit it just to their, so Barclays does one, it's just for their customers, or Credit Suisse or whoever. But because of COVID, a lot of those are getting stuck out there on the internet. Those are phenomenal. I've listened to some. A lot of times the CEO gets up and speaks about their company, and that gives you really, really great insights. Now, YouTube, you definitely, when you get to paper 2, you definitely want to put your CEO on YouTube and find your CEO talking about their company. That's extremely valuable. But yeah, consult. I mean, if you find something on consulting firm, let me know. I don't know which ones would have stuff that you could get that you didn't have to pay them for it. I mean, there's stuff everywhere now, and it's all free. You just have to make sure it's quality. You can tell if it's quality just listening a few seconds to YouTube. If the person sounds like they know what they're talking about. If they look like they're 12 years old, maybe not. So maybe some history. So your firm, not your firm, but your industry, it may have started with certain invention or something. Now, if you're doing consumer staples, consumer discretionary, maybe it doesn't make so much sense. But something along those lines. And here's where it gets wacky. You're going to get into issues, but here's what I want you to do. Be real careful on this because I count a lot on this. I want all your issues under Porter's 5 forces. All right. I want Porter's 5 forces to be the template for your paper. You even had Porter's 5 forces. I'm going to start it tonight so you can start seeing that.
I have a question. So, I'm doing pharma and regular part, but it's bigger.
Yeah, so if you can put it under Porter's, put it under Porter's. Let me give you some examples. Well, who knows Porter's? Y'all tell me. Name one of the 5 forces. So let's start with that one. So rivalry inside industry. All right, so somewhere in your paper, you probably want to talk about the major players. That works really well here. Who are the major players? So a lot of stuff, you read the example papers that I don't like, this is one part I really don't like about those papers. In the beginning part, they have a list of like 6 or 7 companies that are the major players, and they do like 3 or 4 paragraphs on each company. So it means they're expecting the person they're writing to read all those paragraphs and that person figure out the differences in those companies. That's not good. I want no one's ever done it before. Let's see if this class can do it. I would love to see a table that has those major players and contrasts them. It could be like if you're doing consumers, maybe like Chipotle, how many stores do they have? I don't know if you have customers. It could be the distinguishing characteristics, what they sell, what's their, we're going to talk about economic moats. What's their competitive angle or competitive? We're going to talk about Porter's strategies that's where you want to put that. What is the differentiation? How does this firm differentiate itself from that firm? Those are kind of things. So like for Exxon, it's, maybe it's their reserves. Exxon's the biggest player, but how can you define that? How can you contrast? How big is Exxon versus Chevron? So there's several things there. We'll have to think, every industry is different. That's why it's tough to do this. But if you can put that in one table, so someone can look at that table and say, oh, I see, that's how that firm is different than that firm. So Walmart, when you think of Walmart, what distinguishes Walmart? Are they cheaper than Costco or about the same? So Costco, you have to have a membership. You have Sam's Club. Costco doesn't have the Walmart, they only have the Sam's Club part. How many stores does Costco have versus Walmart versus Target? How does Walmart distinguish themselves? A lot of locations, cheap, price is the key. Is Target's number one thing cheapness? What's their slogan? They even tells you in their slogan. Forget what it was, but they have a slogan that kind of distinguishes that they're not Walmart. Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember. I don't have a TV, so I never know what they're doing. Well, Kohl's. How do you distinguish Kohl's from everybody else? I've been in Kohl's one time in my life, and I was like, why does anyone come in here? But there may be a reason. It might be because of certain sales that they have or certain product lines that they have. What exactly do they do? So that's what you're trying to do. If in one table you can tell your boss, here's the industry, here's how they differentiate. And if you don't think they differentiate, it's if you can't distinguish a Kohl's from a Dillard's or whatever, and I think Dillard's is still in business. I haven't been in Dillard's since high school, but how do you know what is the why? And one way I think about it is, why do I go to Dillard's? Why do you get in the car and drive to Dillard's? How would you answer that question? And why do you get in the car and drive to Walmart? There's two right around the corner from me. Like for me, I'm within 3 minutes of two Walmarts. I don't know why. They're cheap, large selection. I'll try to find you. I don't think anyone's doing Costco, but there's a wonderful YouTube of the CEO of Costco, and in one sentence, he defines why Costco is different than everybody else. And what does he say? Limited SKU. Why is that important? That's the key to their whole business. And he's like, we're not moving off of that. We're not going to have 50,000 items. We're going to have these items so we can really take care of our vendors, get the price we want. That's key. That means I'm not going to go to Costco if I want a wide selection of, I don't know what I want. I'm going to go shop around. I go to Costco if I need 3 years worth of soda or something, and I want it all in one big box. I kind of know what I want. So that's the key you want here, is if you can somehow explain your industry. And if there's companies, what Porter says, stuck in the middle, you can't really, that's where the banking industry was for so long. You couldn't tell one bank from another. They're all exactly the same. That's an issue. We'll talk about the Porters. We talk about cost leadership and differentiation. And that's really want to say, how do they differentiate themselves? How does Target differentiate itself from other players? So if you can do that in a table, that's fine. If you're going to do it in paragraphs like the other papers, that's fine as well. It's really hard for me to read. And you could do it both ways, right? You could do paragraphs and then summarize it in the table. I'll probably read through your paragraphs much faster if you can go to the table pretty quick.
You said it's bigger players and then separate columns.
Yeah, I might do it if I were doing consumer retail. I might have Walmart and go from biggest to smallest. I might have a title that says this represents 65% of the industry's revenues. These are the major players. I might have maybe not a pie, it could be a pie chart. It says Walmart, Target, and then others is like 20%. The first line might be total revenue, second line may mean number of stores, another line might be number of square feet. And then that's when I'm getting really specific. So that's when I start trying to figure out, how do they distinguish? So low price competes on this, whatever. It could even be things like has a store brand credit card, or whatever you think is distinguishing those. I do like to just sit down and figure out why do I go to this company versus another one. I've been to Target a few times, but I almost never go to Target. I go to Target when I don't want any people around. So there's no people, Target's just wide open. There's few people. Walmart is like there's 80 people in every line, and just so especially during the holiday season. You ever gone to like a Christmas card lot aisle at Walmart? There's boxes everywhere, so it's a mess. So that you think major players would go up here on the history, but it fits pretty well in the rivalry within the industry. How spread out is it? So that can work. Y'all remember another Porter's? Huh?
Threats of new entry.
Okay, so barriers to entries. So someone was asking about regulations. So were you talking about regulation?
Yes.
Or, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, on pharmaceuticals. So Louis, yeah, regulation can be a barrier to entry. You could go there. You could go under history. You could don't really think it fits under Porter, but if you can put it under Porter, put it under Porter. Regulation can be capital requirements, brand, ID, and there's certain things that can fit under there. What's another one? Firepower. Here's where you can do a macro on consumers. It could be consumer spending, it could be consumer incomes, those kind of things. So let me just real quickly on the macro so you can start thinking about it. What I mean by macro, it's an economic type of number. You probably want at least two of them in your paper. So a macro is something that you can talk about the history, you can talk about where it is today, where it's going, how it relates to your industry. And you want it as close to your industry as you can. So probably a chart. So if I'm doing, let's see some of your, so Geronimo, you might show oil prices. And you show where they've been, where they are today, where they're going. You can, point out the Ukraine war or whatever. And then where are they going? So how is electronic vehicles going to affect oil prices going forward? Now, could he do CPI, Consumer Price Index? He could, but that relates to every company. That's not so specific to Exxon that it makes some sense. So you want to get specific. If you're doing Nike, cotton is pretty important to them because that's a big part of their shoe. What are cotton prices doing? So where have they been? Where are they going? And then tie it to the shoe. So what percentage of the price of the shoe is cotton? That would be important to do. All right, y'all see what I mean by macro? So every industry is going to have a specific thing related to macro. So buyer power, the consumers can certainly work there. Switching costs, we'll talk about. That's a pretty important one. Trying to think. Those of you have a. So Dolby, Julia, switching costs is a huge one for you because, you think about purchasing managers, there may be another product out there that's cheaper, but no purchasing manager wants to be the one that switches and it all blows up and it doesn't work. Dolby's safe, it always works. Maybe it's a little more expensive, but I don't lose my job if I go with Dolby. If I try number two and it doesn't work, I'm going to lose my job. Those kind of things on the buyer power. I'm not giving you all. We're going to go through this, and obviously supplier power. Here's where you have input prices. So that may be where oil prices fit for you, Geronimo, is oil is really an input. So Nike, I should have said that on Nike. So Nike, the cotton for Nike is a supplier power issue. It's not a buyer power issue, supplier power. We'll talk more. There's a lot more we can do. I'm just giving you the list. And then the last one is threat. I forgot to ask y'all for them, so they'll probably already have them. So threat of substitutes may not apply to all of your industries. So Geronimo, definitely electricity is a threat to you, to yours. Pharmaceuticals, that one's a little trickier. A threat of substitutes is not the threat of a competitor coming in. A threat of substitute is a whole new industry starts doing what you're doing and people stop using you and going somewhere else. All right, so, but anyway, you're gonna use this under rivalry for industry. This is where the Porter's strategies work. Y'all remember the 3 strategies? I mentioned them. Cost leadership, differentiation, and stuck in the middle. Differentiation. I can't have to do it phonetically. So if you have an industry, so let's say Walmart is the cost leader. That means Target's using differentiation. So what does Target do for differentiation? We're gonna talk much more about this. Porter has a lot to say. I don't know if y'all have seen Porter's books. They're like that, they're thick. I have one book from Porter that he had his autograph. A former student saw him and he had, and I opened it up, I see the autograph, is like, is that my student's autograph? And so I go out on the internet and find Porter's autograph. Hey, I got Michael Porter's autograph, and I look, that's pretty wild. And he even has my name in it. That was pretty cool. Massive book. He goes in so much detail. You might find his book because he probably has an entire 20 pages just on your industry. I read it on Audible. I mean, listen, it's a tough book to do on Audible. It's just deep. You just get lost in the weeds because he goes in so deep. He's a pretty amazing guy, what he's done over his career. So as part of that table is, who is the obvious, so you think of Southwest Air as the cost leader, but are they really? Is it Frontier? Is it Spirit now? Is it Ryanair? Who's really the cost leader on airlines? And then how does United differentiate itself from Delta, from American? That's what you're trying to figure out. What is the difference in those two, those firms? And so when we'll talk more about differentiation. It's not just that they differentiate, but how. How do they differentiate themselves? What is the key to them distinguishing themselves? Is it the product? Is it how they advertise? Is there quality of their service? What is it that they do? Right. And then once you do all of that, you have your conclusion, the attractiveness, the industry, growth, and risk. And here's another place that cut off a lot of points. I was telling someone earlier, I have so many students who do this academic thing of Porter's, and then they come to their conclusion, and their conclusion is as if they never did the Porter's. Doesn't reference it, doesn't care that they ever did it. They give me a conclusion that's completely unrelated to what they just did. Your conclusion needs to be directly tied to Porter's. All right. And here's another place where a table works really, really well. Have the 5 forces, how they do. And you want a final conclusion. This is an industry that's really primed for growth, strong growth. The main risk I see is this, but this industry should be stronger. This is an industry that's really struggling. Obviously, with Exxon, industry is under a lot of pressure because of climate change issues and because of EVs. However, I don't think it's as bad as people are saying because whatever, that's your final conclusion, but you got to tie back to your Porters in some way. So a table can certainly help. One other thing I want you to be real careful on Porters is avoid the words strong and weak on Porters. All right, that's the traditional approach. So buyer power is strong. That is very confusing to me. When you say buyer power is strong, do you mean buyer power is strong so it's bad for the industry, or this industry is strong when it comes to buyer power? All right, so what I prefer is positive for industry or negative for industry. That's much, much easier for me. If you say strong or weak, I have to sit down and figure out, okay, is this good for the industry or bad? You say supplier power is strong, that sounds bad for the industry. but a lot of times students flip it. So positive for the industry, negative for the industry, that to me is really, really clear. Okay, so avoid, now if you use market line, they use strong and weak. You have to be really careful. When they say buyer power is strong, that's a negative. You should be aware that that's a negative for the industry. That's essentially your paper one. You'll see how that works. So if I were you, I would get this outline, including the port. What are you going to do under each part of the porters? This is where I can help you as well. This is where also reading other students' papers can help you really, really well. And Allison, Jamari did a paper on a real estate company. If I can find it, I'll put it out there. It was a really good paper, but I didn't put it out. If you don't see it, remind me, because I do have it, and he's actually going to be the one talking to the class because he's starting in that career. He's a really good writer, so if I can remember to put that out there. But under each one, I have that all fleshed out, and then your job is over time, just come in, say, I'm gonna work on this today. That's the best way to do it. I'm gonna focus in on this. If you're thinking I gotta write this paper, you're gonna jump around, you're not gonna get anything done, you get interrupted. Say today I gotta get this section of the paper written. You really can write each one of these sections independently. You don't really have to coordinate them. They really do work independently. So does that seem overwhelming, or does that seem more doable? You have several weeks to do it, got a month to do it. So you need to, have a certain amount done each week and get ahead of the curve, but that really is your first paper. Questions on that, or comments or concerns? It can get really subjective of which thing you put under which portal. So you really have to do think through it. To me, supplier power, I almost always put labor issues here. Labor is a supply, you hire workers, that's a supply. So if you have union issues, so someone's doing Netflix, right? We say, I thought someone was doing Netflix. So, Netflix, you're going to have a whole section on the writer's strike. I don't understand the writer's strike because when that happened, I stopped to think what I watch, and I watch stuff which there's no writers. I'm watching this guy mow people's yards. It's like no writers. Have y'all seen that? I'm watching this guy dress up like a bush in downtown San Antonio, scaring people. Y'all seen that? I mean, you don't need a writer for that. You don't need actors for that. I'm thinking, when's the last time I watched the show with writers? Oh yeah, that show was produced in 1963. So yeah, those writers are all dead. So I don't know what y'all write. If y'all watch, how does that affect Netflix? Who wants to have this new programming out there and those kind of, so you'd have to write a whole section on that, but that would go under supplier power. So some of them I think are pretty straightforward. So try to get this weekend, really get this fleshed out as far as what you're going to put where. If you have questions, come talk to me. I'll be making up stuff off the top of my head just want to know about the industry. But then that's where Market Line can really, really help you. So we're going to do industry profiles. All right, there we go. So they call it air freight. I don't know why they call it air freight. So you're looking for North America. So here you go, North America Transportation Services. There's a PDF, January 2023. So it's a little old, but that's okay. So you've got 54 pages again. This essentially is your paper one, but you got to write it yourself. So market definition. What did you say? What's the first thing you're going to do in the paper? Define the industry. Transportation services consists of the air, marine, rail, and road freight sectors. Air freight, there it is. There's your definition. They give you some data. You may not like this data, or you might say, wow, that's a really good way to show it. So these are some things you can do. That looks like a really good chart right there, doesn't it? How much is air? How much is sea? I was telling Selma to look up the Baltic. Y'all know the Baltic, what was it called?
The Baltic Drive.
Baltic what?
The Baltic Drive.
Yeah, the Baltic. So any kind of paper on transportation is going to have the Baltic dry. So you need a macro factor. There's one of your macro factors. The Baltic dry index essentially talks about how much it costs to ship things around the world. And can you see China in there? We were talking about that earlier. That's China, right? China made transportation costs zoom, and then China slowed down, and we had the 2008 crisis, and then everything came back down. They'll probably talk about the major players as well. There's the global side of it. And then they do Porter. Now, you can use their Porter to help look for those issues. They go extreme. And you look at buyer power, look at all the stuff they have. I wouldn't do all of those, but you might see one that really gives you an idea of how to take it. The other thing, one thing I really don't like about Market Line, I don't like this chart. You'll see students put the chart into their paper. The problem with that is they copy and paste Market Lines in their paper, and then they write their own. It's like, how would yours be the same as Market Line? So if I were you, I would not use this chart at all. If you want to do something like that, you can, but you don't need to use their terminology. They're doing Michael Porter, and they're going in much more detail. Some of those things might apply, so I would definitely look and read around the list, but they're going to go into each one of those in quite a bit of detail. So you essentially have an example of your first paper from Market Line. You just got to write it yourself, and it's probably going to go more in depth. You don't want your first paper to be 54 pages long. That would be a little extreme. But you can see how Market Line's are not a bad place to start. And you see my problem here when they say supplier power, strong or weak. What does that mean? So if it's strong, should I avoid industries where they're on the outside? And I'm looking for industry inside. That just doesn't. That's the other reason I don't like this chart. I always have to look at it and say, okay, what exactly are they saying? And even here, the figure doesn't help me because there is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is strong. I guess that's gray. What is that gray? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I would, if I were you, I'd ignore the chart entirely. So get your Market Line going. Let's see if I can find another one here. Let's try Exxon. Exxon's probably gonna be a little bit extreme. Now, Exxon is North America, but energy is global. So if you can find something that's specific. They have some energy consumption that might be an interesting one to look. Not where they got Brazil chemicals, Brazil oil and gas, North American chemicals. So a whole bunch of stuff. This one was written in June 2023, so pretty recent. It's only 49 pages. I don't know why they would have a nuclear power plant. Isn't that a nuclear power plant? Why is that on oil and gas? I'm not sure I understand that, but okay. I'm not an energy guy, so I'm sure I'm missing the obvious. But yeah, so it's gonna give you a lot of ideas. Don't forget about your company's investor relations, but also don't forget about your company's competitors' investor relations. All right. Your company may not have much, but their competitor may have something out there. Someone's doing Lululemon, right? Yeah, so there's probably some pretty good. Apparel manufacturing. I don't know where renewable energy. There's some apparel manufacturing, but it's pretty old, but it's not bad. It's within the last year. Global, and it's global. 55 pages. With apparel, Lululemon, I think is unique. Don't they? I think they do everything in Canada. I don't think they have the sweatshop problem that Nike and some. I don't know. I haven't, but Yeah, so that's kind of they're more expensive, but at least you're not using child labor or whatever. So, you know, those are issues that you can certainly put under supplier power. Yeah, there's some good charts in there. One other thing, and we'll go on, we'll probably have to wait till next class. We'll go in detail on porters, but you know porters well enough, you can kind of start putting pieces in, and we'll get in more detail. But really, really important, just another thing to keep in mind, if you're doing UPS, paper one is not about UPS. The only reason UPS will be in paper one is if it's a major player. So it's possible you don't even mention Hulu in paper one. Doesn't even come up because it's not a major, you know, it's not Nike, it's not Reebok, or how do y'all say ADDIDAS? Adidas. You say, yeah, everything I've heard they say Adidas. I've never said it as Adidas.
It's a German brand.
And that's how they say it. Yeah, I always learned it as a little kid as Adidas, but I guess I learned it wrong. So yeah, if you're doing shoes, Nike will probably be mentioned. And if Nike, your company is fine, but paper one is not about your company. It's only about the industry. All right. So avoid talking about your company unless they're a major player. Yeah. You have to figure out if you're the only company in your industry. So you have to somehow work through that issue. So she'll probably have to talk, there'll be almost no choice. There are some competitors out there that she can talk about, but don't make paper one about your company. All right. That's what paper two is about. Now, do you have enough now? You can really get into your paper this weekend. If you're having serious capital IQ issues, just email me. If you can take a picture of the error message you're getting and send that to me as well, I can send that on to Natasha and ask her as well, or Catherine. I'll probably do it to both. And I'll try to figure out which machines are working in the FSC for capital IQ. So, all right, I can let you. I'll give you 8 minutes to work, 7 minutes to work on your papers. So no questions. Everybody's good. Anybody want to meet with me on Monday? I do. So email me if you want to meet on Monday. Let's find a time I can come up here because I'm pretty flexible Monday. I can do the same thing on Wednesday as well. So, you know, email me if you want me to come up and do, you know, a session with you. You know, if I want to come up, then what I'll do is say, you come at 2, you come at 2:45. So we kind of spread it out. So you're not sitting there waiting for another person. So, all right, that's it for tonight. I'll see y'all on, well, whenever I see y'all next. Oh, and Selma found that you can get the transcript for the business breakdown. And I thought that was, it might be on the Colossus, she found it on Apple. But if you want to do quotes from that, you can get the transcription. You have to try to type as fast as you can. So if you can't find that, let us know and we'll figure it out.